Hi guys, I wanted to share this game with you that I played today. It's a tough one for me, and it's a 15-10 rapid game that I played against Abhi 1196, who is nearly 150 points lower rated than me. So we'll go straight into it. It's a very, very clear lesson from this one. And one which I hope to remember myself. Okay, so I'm playing, if you're interested, a variant of the London system called the Jabava London system that Grandmaster Simon Williams has done a course on Chessable. I've played the London system myself for quite a lot as white, so I just thought this was interesting. I'm working through it. Okay, so it's London system. Always starts with a d4, and then black responds with e6. I bring my knight out to c3, which is where it differs from the regular London. Black plays another quiet move, b6. Maybe thinking ideas about fianchettoing his light square bishop there onto b7, perhaps. I bring out my bishop to f4. Okay, so in my first three moves, I've developed two pieces. That is generally a good idea. The more pieces you can develop, the faster you can develop, the more of the board that you control. Black then brings his bishop all the way out to a6, where it is lined up against my own light square bishop, which really is kind of preventing me from playing e3, because then if I do that, that bishop could come down, take my bishop on f1, force my king to move. Then I forfeit castling rights, which affects king's safety. Obviously, castling is a great shortcut to get your king safe and to get your rooks towards the middle of the board. So I don't want to do that. I play a4 with the idea maybe of moving my knight up to c5, blocking off that bishop. Black plays another slow developing move with his pawn. Bit of an unusual one, this one, c6. So I move my knight into e4. So what I'm doing now is I'm eyeing up an opportunity here on d6. The idea being, if I put my knight on there, put him into check, put black into check, black will either have to move their king, which is not ideal because then they'll lose the castling rights, or will be forced to take with a dark square bishop. At the moment, black is putting most of their pawns on light squares, which means their dark square bishop is going to have a lot more activity and a lot more space on the board. So that is a good bishop. I would be then trading my knight, which at this point in the game is not a bad piece, but I like the idea of the exchange because also it would put my bishop on d6, preventing black from castling. And there's no pawn that can come and threaten that bishop if it goes onto this square on d6. Also, the queen can't threaten it, and neither can the king. So that might be a nice little kind of outpost. Black responds by moving their knight out to f6, typical developing move. I go in and do the check. Black captures, I recapture. Okay, so that's what I wanted. I considered what would happen if that exchange happened, and I concluded that I would be slightly better off, so I'm happy that that went that way. Black pushes c5. I realised that I can take, if black recaptures, I can take back with the bishop, which I do. That's leaving me one pawn up, and black is still prevented from castling. This is interesting now because black spots an opportunity, comes in with the queen to a5, which is quite a common move in a lot of openings. So it seems to be forking my king and my bishop, so I was a little bit concerned about this, and I realised I could just play b4. The b4 pawn is protected by the bishop. This is very often a structure that you look for in endgames as well, when you've got a bishop and a pawn in this relationship where both of them are defending each other and obviously cannot be taken by a king and stuff like that. So this is looking nice because now the queen is really starting to look boxed in. Queen can't move to b5 or b6. So, it really feels like I've gained a tempo in this game. So the queen has to move, ends up moving back to a kind of a mediocre square there on c7. I bring my knight out. Black brings their other knight out. That's now eyeing up this pawn, but the pawn is defended by the bishop on c5. I then increase the pressure on Black's queen. Queen moves back. Oh yeah, so this is the idea. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to play b4 because I've noticed that Black has these two pieces on the same rank with one square between them. Perfect opportunity for a pawn to come in and fork. Right, that's the only way a pawn can fork pieces. However, I realise if I do this now, Black can just come straight back with his queen to a5 and put me in check again. At which point I'll have to come out of check, and I can't just bring the bishop back to do that. So I thought, well, if we can first persuade the queen to move. I don't see how that's helping. Okay, so I do the fork. Black comes in, well, moves one of his pieces out of the way. I figure that I can take that piece, force Black to move his king to recapture. Then I take the bishop. That's all fine. Queen recaptures. I push e3 with a discovered attack by my light square bishop. This is also helping my light square bishop to come out into the game, which is a good thing. So at this point, I'm looking quite good. We've got 6 pawns each. I've got this isolated pawn on the c-file, but in compensation for that, Black has already moved his king and can't then castle up there on the king side. Black moves. I decide that an exchange of queens would be in my interest at this point. The other interesting thing, of course, is that I've got 2 minor pieces on the board, so I'm 3 points up. So I figure that a bishop and a knight is much better than the knight, so it's in my interests to exchange material off the board. Black decides that's not such a good idea. So I then play my knight to d4, where it's defended by the pawn. It's also then defending the c2 pawn. And this is a good principle in general. If you watch Grandmaster games, they're very often placing their pieces so that more or less everything is defended by something else, right? Even when they're thinking about their attacks, even when they're thinking about their own plans, always thinking about defense as well. So here, the knight is defended by a poor pawn. I don't really want that pawn to move on g2, but if I move it towards the middle of the board, it's got more space. It's controlling more of the squares on Black's side, because it's right in the middle, in that middle 4, and it's also defending the pawn on c2. So generally just a useful and sensible move. Black comes in, which I expected him to do, to attack the queen with his knight. I just move up to d3. Black comes in with a check. I move the king forward. Okay, I'm feeling pretty comfortable at this point. Black comes in with a pawn push to f5. I think that may be a little bit dodgy. So now I've got ideas of bringing my bishop out to g2. So this is like a very late fianchetto of the bishop. If I can bring my bishop out to g2, then maybe capture the knight. Pawn captures, queen captures. That's me winning another pawn, and I'm still a knight up. So what's not to like with that? Black comes in with a check. I move away. There's no other major threat. Still feeling quite good at this point. Black pushes a pawn, which I think is maybe on the careless side. I come back, see the obvious check there, and Black moves his king back to d8. Now at this point, this is one of those critical points in the game. I remember saying to myself at this point this is quite a sharp game. This is an interesting game. So when we say sharp, it means that the game is kind of open and there are attacking possibilities for both sides. It's kind of the opposite of a closed game. So I'm aware that this game was sharp. I had the option here of snatching a pawn on g7. I didn't want to do that, so I'm thinking at this point, okay, what can I do really to put pressure on that exposed king there in the middle of the board? My pieces are looking good, bearing down. I've got ideas of moving my bishop here to h3, which would create some great attacking opportunities with my queen to dive into d7 with a checkmate. And so I decide to go in and threaten this, start to threaten the king. In fact, this isn't really a threat. I couldn't actually have played e7. But what I think is going on at this point is that I'm starting to get excited. You know, I can sense a win. I've got an extra bishop, I've got an extra pawn. Black's got these 3 pawn islands as well. Neither rook is developed. So I figure, look, if I can exchange queens off the board, then that's only going to, you know, be to my advantage. The more material you can remove from the board, the more, the bigger difference a material advantage makes. Okay, so here I'm expecting black probably to. So here I'm expecting black probably to exchange queens, but what I missed was that. Queen to e4 checkmate. Okay, so obviously the queen here is guarded by the knight. The king cannot move here because of the queen, and cannot move there because of the knight. Okay, so this is what we're saying: king safety, king safety. Rule number 2. Rule number 1: take your time. Rule number 2: king safety. Your plans are worth nothing if you get checkmated. And I just got checkmated. I got careless. I got overexcited. I thought, let's chalk up this win and get 5 points for the game or whatever. And I didn't do what my opponent did. My opponent took his time, looked at the board, and saw that there was a checkmate. So my opponent rated 1185, saw something that I'd missed. So, it's one of those lessons that we all need to learn, and I think it's one of those that we need to learn very often again and again and again. So, I thought I'd want to share this with you. We all make mistakes. This is a bad one and quite an embarrassing one, but I don't think there's a better game that I've played recently that really emphasises the importance of that second rule. King safety always has to come first. King safety before your own attacking ideas.